Good evening and welcome to another edition of Burlington and Beyond. I'm very pleased that you're able to join us. We have a very special guest this evening. If this is the first time that you're tuned in, I would like to just express the fact that we are a band of brothers here from Burlington who have a show that looks at some of the issues, the local issues, as well as government at all levels. And our intent is to try and help you understand some of the issues perhaps a little bit better than otherwise. The members here are all town meeting members here in Burlington, I'm very proud to say. And I'm equally proud to say that our guest has appointed me to the Capital Budget Committee. So we have a gentleman who's on the Ways and Means Committee and myself who will be hopefully doing some worthwhile work with capital budget. So with regard to local issues, I think that we can give you some good inside information, at least some good advice, I should say. Just before introducing our guest, I just want you to know who our panel is. We have John Glynn here on the left, Larry Way, Adam Sinese, and myself, Pat Marino. Okay, now let's get down to some serious business. First of all, it is a pleasure for me to welcome Sally Willard, who has been elected the moderator for the town of Burlington, and Sally is a delightful person, and she is going to share some of her experiences and some of her ideas, hopefully with regard to the job of being moderator. So Sally, how are you?
I'm great today, thank you.
Good.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I'm sure that these panelists would have all kinds of questions for you. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself? I think you just mentioned that you were a town meeting member and so on. Where does your experience come from?
I've been a town meeting member I was a town meeting member for 17 years. I have worked for myself for almost 20 years, and one of my neighbors got a postcard that was addressed to me, but it was stuck to hers, and she introduced herself. She was a town meeting member, and we got to be friends, and she said, "Gosh, Sally, you might like to be a town meeting member. You might be interested." And once I was elected, she said, "Gee, you might like the Capital Budget Committee because you're good with numbers." So I said, "Okay, I'll try that." I was appointed. I was on the Capital Budget Committee for 5 years. I was chair for 3. My second year, I think the chair left and said, "I don't want to do it," and no one else stepped up, so I did.
Good for you.
Seemed an okay thing to do. In my 5th year, a former lawyer, Harold DeLong, said to me, "Sally, you might like to try the Board of Appeals or the Land Use Committee," because the Land Use Committee had recently proposed doing something with the landlocked parcels.
Right.
And I said, "Well, let me look at it."
Mm-hmm.
So I watched the Board of Appeals one night, and I thought, I don't think that's for me. So I put my name in for the Land Use Committee and was there for 9 years. We did some interesting work, and we reviewed a lot of different proposals that came before town. We addressed some zoning issues that we thought were important to the town, rewriting the PDD article in the zoning bylaw because we thought the PDD is a worthwhile zoning tool to have, but if no one's ever going to approve one because they think the process is misused, then why don't we rewrite it? So we went through that process. And
Very good. You've been in Burlington quite a while then.
30 years.
30 years, okay. You've seen a lot of changes.
There's a lot more traffic than there was.
But there have been some other things that have been, I'm sure you've seen that you probably agree with, the growth, the business growth in particular. Yeah. Are you comfortable? You've only had one session as moderator. You seem to be very, very comfortable. I think John mentioned that you really did a super job, and I totally agree. And do you feel comfortable with it? I mean, or you have to one or two more sessions, perhaps?
Well, I was, to my surprise, not as nervous as I thought I would be. Perhaps that's because I do get up in front of people and speak, and from the podium, I'm just thought of it as I'm running a meeting. And I just have to make sure that I can see and recognize everyone
that light issue
in the front row or in the back row,
Yeah.
and in the far corners, that I can see the hands that go up and call on people.
I'm curious, how do you get to know all the names of the 100 and some odd members? Did you do any practice beforehand to get an idea of who was who?
No, I'll tell you, during the campaign, I met an awful lot of people who I would not have known, people who came up, whether at town meeting or another time, and introduced themselves, and who I spoke with, and who I would see, and who would remind me who they were. And I've always had a pretty good, I've always done pretty well with putting names and
Name
faces
retention?
together. Yes.
Oh, that's a plus.
Yeah, yeah. And I had a little help from Amy Warfield, who she's looked out at people a lot longer than I have.
She's been at it for
It's
a
a
while.
good person
too.
to have to the left of you
Yeah.
while you're standing out facing that
Whispering out
crowd.
to you.
Yes.
Obviously, everybody that gets involved in town goes through Amy's office. So
Yeah.
yeah, if you couldn't have a better person sitting to your left.
So you did enjoy the first session.
Yes, it's an interesting process. I've always given the moderators the benefit of the doubt that if I was waving my arms and they didn't call on me, that was because they just didn't see it. And I learned the first night that indeed that's true, that you
sure.
just can't see with the bright lights shining down on you.
Yeah.
So we turned them down after that, and it worked much better. The process is it's just a process, and that's why I think why I felt comfortable with it, because there's an article to be addressed, you have to call on people, and
The rules for running the session, did you just pick them up along the way, or did you actually have to look at something to prepare for it, or?
well, when I was chair of the committees, the capital budget, and more importantly, the land use committee, because I did that for a lot longer, and we had a variety of guests come through. You follow the same rules.
Okay.
Recognizing people, in that case for the land use committee, we'd always let the guests speak, and then there was an orderly process for letting all of the members ask their questions. I would start at one end of the table and go around to the other
Orderly.
end, in an orderly manner.
Yeah.
And I think that as long as you follow certain protocol, I learned in my research for the role that there is an orderly protocol, and if you follow the protocol, then the meeting should run well. Some meetings have, and some organizations, assemblies, have more rules than others. If you have more rules and it's more to think about.
Sure.
But it's also a better way, I think, in some cases, to keep people on the same page. So that as long as everyone is on the same page, which is to accomplish what you're there to accomplish, then you can have rules that will help.
Right.
For example, if we ever wanted to have time limits, we could do that.
Well, keeping people in town meeting on the same page is probably, I think, the most challenging thing for the moderator to do. Did you have to kind of review the Mass General bylaws in terms of how, assembly-like, town meeting is structured versus, say, a smaller group that you had with capital budget?
Well, we follow generally Robert's rules, and in town meeting, some town meetings follow something called town meeting time, which is a set of rules that parliamentary law, similar to Robert's rules,
Right.
but it's been created by and written by moderators from Massachusetts. We follow Robert's rules and then custom. In anticipation that I was going to be elected, I found the National Association of Parliamentarians, and I first took one course on a very short course, and then I took another one, which was a prep course for the parliamentarian exams. So I learned a lot. I took a lot of notes when I was doing it, and I'm happy to say that they had 7 or 8 quizzes as part of the course, and I passed them all.
Oh, good.
For you.
Are these online courses or?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, National Association of Parliamentarians. I was hoping to have a meeting or two that I could go to learn more, but they just didn't have any scheduled. I'm now a member of the Massachusetts Moderators Association, and on their email list, they do
Is that
a program.
automatic? Is that automatic when you were appointed, or?
Well, I had to submit an application.
Okay.
So I did that. I knew that they had a mailing list, and I knew that there was an organization. So once I was elected, I went ahead and made my application. They have a sometimes active email list. The first question that, once I was on the list, the first question that came across was about limits when someone wants to amend a budget amount. What kind of limits are there? And is there a standard? Well, there is no standard, I learned. Some towns, by custom, have a 10% or 15 or 20% cap, so that it's just understood that if you're going to amend an amount, you don't just double it, but you could stay within reason. Other towns assume that the amount on the warrant is set, and you cannot raise the amount. And in other cases, people feel that it's up to town meeting. And as long as the town has the wherewithal, then if town meeting wants to change the amount to something they want to change it to,
I think we did.
go for it.
I think we did
We
one of
did,
the
yeah.
warrants, as a matter of fact.
Yes, we did.
We doubled the number.
Yes, we did. And that was really, it was interesting after, when that went through, to have that be the first question that came through the mailing list. I thought, oh, this is good. I've learned something for the future.
You spent a good deal of time campaigning. You did a terrific job. I can recall every time I saw you were out there in the wind and rain and whatnot, and it paid off.
Yes, I also, I work for myself, and cold calling is not my,
Core competency?
it's not my core competency. So I spent a lot of time calling. In some cases, people dial for dollars. I was dialing for votes. I spoke with an awful lot of people all around town and I left a lot of messages, but I was always glad when someone said, "Oh, thank goodness you're not a robocall." And it was interesting.
Yeah.
But I think that made a huge difference, just calling people.
Have you gotten to know all of the town meeting members? Do you feel as though you know all of them, or are there still some that are
Far from it.
far from it? Okay, okay. But you must have a pretty good start on recognizing people with a name. I mean, even after one session.
I can place more names with on faces now
Yeah.
than I could before. We are hoping to have a town meeting member social,
Mm-hmm.
so that town meeting members could meet each other and know who they are. I was in town meeting for 17 years, and I must say that I sat down next to people that I never knew who they were until,
This is
They might have
something you're
stood out.
hoping to have
yeah. a
in
town-
the near future?
Yeah,
Or in the
near future.
Oh, wow.
A town
Very
meeting
interesting idea.
member
Great idea.
social, so that people can meet each other. It was suggested, and I don't know if all of you got the name tags when you went into.
Yes.
Did say that. That was a little different.
The idea was that
Yeah, just
when you
we're all
turn
commenting
to,
in the back as you see us. How good our eyes.
the idea was that when you turn to look someplace, maybe you'd notice the name of the person sitting next to you.
You know, I can tell you personally that I've seen so many names, not only in possibly emails or wherever, you know. And I tried for a while, people that I try to match a face with a name, and in a few cases it worked, but for the most part, no. Adam, I
Well-
knew you right away.
Right.
Well, it's hard because you only see them, 3 or 4 times in May, for the first set of
Yeah.
meetings, and once or twice in September, and then maybe
No,
a
but
couple
these are
more
people
times.
like around town, when you go shopping and you see a face, and then all of a sudden at the meeting, at one of the town meeting, and you see that same face, and gee, I know that person. You try to match it up. After a while, it takes time.
Well, even being on TV, I know that more than once I would go into Market Basket and run into people who had seen me on TV.
Yeah.
And
Oh, yeah.
I forget what I don't recall at the moment what it was they were complimenting me on, but I thought, oh, this is great. People watch.
I
That's a
remember
plus.
the first night we taped, actually, I went home and I saw my Facebook feed was a little more robust than usual. And some people had said, oh, it's like we were flipping channels. And so,
Well, Sally, after 17 years of being a town meeting member, how was it to be on the other side this time and not be able to vote?
As moderator, I have to be impartial. So it's
Was that a
as
challenge?
a town meeting member, it's there are many things that you think, well, gee, this is a good thing, or it's been vetted, and although I'm not really sure that I agree with it, everyone else says it's a good thing. So, but I don't think there was anything that was as controversial or that evenly divided the body enough that I would have felt like I really wanted to vote.
So no real hot issues, mainly because there wasn't that much controversy that
Right,
you felt you needed to get into.
right.
No, what were the most heavily debated, warrant articles was probably the solar panels to some degree.
And I
just
think a little bit
because
of-
of lack of information.
A little bit of OPEB too.
And
Even
OPEB is
OPEB,
always-
yeah.
OPEB is
we-
still,
and the sidewalks. The sidewalks did get a little
Sidewalks,
Well, that was. I
controversial.
think that was mainly because we were looking to allocate more money to that, obviously with the residents in mind. And I was a little surprised by almost a pushback from the town saying, well, we allocate things and we put thought into this before we give it to you, so we thought this was enough. And I think a lot of people in the audience are sitting there going, $50,000 for sidewalks doesn't seem like a
Well, I did think that was
really
interesting, though.
robust number. And I thought that was a surprise coming back from DPW from my point of view, because I would think. I think we get, is it Chapter 90 money, I think, for roads, to the tune of $1 and $1.5 million a year or so. So for us to allocate another $100,000 or $150,000 for the sidewalks, because there are a lot of really, bad sidewalks in town, and how many, how many lawsuits do you have? You want to have when somebody falls over and breaks their ankle and sues the town for XYZ amount of money because they're not properly repaired. So to me, I was surprised that didn't get a little bit higher scrutiny by the people that were submitting that particular warrant to us in the first place.
Well, I thought that it was a couple of the Ways and Means members that I thought brought up good points. It might have been Bill Byer or Sonia Rollins, but they said, there is no plan. If we were to double this budget and make it for another $50,000, there is no plan in place.
But there should
as to
be.
How that would have been spent.
And that was the frustration.
No, I understand what you're saying.
There should have been. So maybe by giving them a little bit more money, it'll get them to wake up to realize that this is something that they ought to take a little bit more consideration of. Granted, obviously, according to them, I don't see what comes in through Ways and Means. They've got a lot of projects that are presented to them, or a lot of spending scenarios that are presented to them, and they weed out, those that they think are worthwhile and those that they aren't. But I think a lot of town meeting members were surprised that this one didn't get a little bit higher visibility.
I have to say that being a new town meeting member, as you are, but you haven't been living in town. I've been in town for a long time, a very long time. I was floored with the money issues. I just could not imagine spending money that liberally. I mean, up and down the warrant. You're not talking about even $10,000. These are $500,000, $6,500. I mean, the numbers are just astronomical. And I found myself scratching my head saying, I can't even imagine the money coming in at that rate. And I know it does, but spending it is so easy. You probably, I'm sure you must have, I'm sure you probably have learned, having been a part of town meeting member, you've seen these numbers grow, and I'm sure they have grown over the years. So it's probably not such a shock, but for the first time, for me, it was really something.
No, the budget's getting up there numbers-wise. $122 million for a 25,000 resident town is a pretty big nut.
The amount of money that the town takes in was just incredible. 90 million, was it? Or something like that, 92 million, I think, in that area. Anyway.
I think it was 96, yeah.
So you look forward to a long career, I hope. after one session. No, you seemed you were well organized. You seemed in control of everything. I think there were only a couple of instances where you had to say, wait 1 second, to make sure that, I can't remember exactly how it came about. You wanted to be sure that everyone was recognized. Oh, I know, you said, if I can't see you, this is before the lights, if I can't see you, be sure you raise your hand and, keep trying, I will get to you. And I thought that was pretty good. Yes, a long career, no?
Being moderator was not something that I had thought about for years. It wasn't my goal in life. But there were people around town who thought that I would do a good job, that I would run the meeting well, and still give people the opportunity to stand up and speak. So they worked on me for several months and finally persuaded me that, well, yes, okay, I'll run.
Well, after your first session, how did you enjoy it?
I enjoyed it. I
thought
that it was, the meeting ran well.
Yeah, it did.
And so the next challenge is to make appointments. I know that Larry and Pat have their names in for appointments, but I don't recall seeing
John or
either
Adam?
John or Adam's name on the poster.
We are
Paul Gerard.
working on that.
My
Paul
Touche.
Gerard. You know, there's nothing better than just jumping right in.
my position is where it was my first town meeting. I'm gonna wait and see. I'm gonna wait a year before trying to get in on a committee. I do have small children. I wouldn't want to get involved in something and only do it halfway. So I'd rather observe as a member of the body for the first year, but I do plan to get involved further on down the road.
I have no
Good.
excuse. I'm the senior town meeting member here besides you.
And what committees have you been on?
I haven't been on any as far as town meeting subcommittees go. I applied a long time ago when somebody else was running and they did an appointment. I think I applied to capital budget probably 5 years ago, but didn't get on. Didn't get appointed, I should say. And I haven't resubmitted since.
Are there several vacancies right now?
Well, there are vacancies. There are vacancies that are created because a term ends. So, if someone wants to stay on the committee, then in general, I think they've always been allowed to. I remember once someone said, well, so-and-so is just trying to run us all off the committee. And I said, well, but you have a term that ends at a certain point. And if your term's not up, then
You're there.
you're there. So there are some committees, like the bylaw review committee. That's a 1-year term. So all of those seats are open. I think there are 15 members of Ways and Means, and there are 4 seats that are end 4 terms that end this year. And so those people will either be reappointed or someone else put on. Same with the capital budget. The capital budget, sometimes committees have openings that are never filled. I remember when I was chair of land use, we had 9, I forget how many members, terrible. We had an opening for 2 years.
Really?
Because there was
Wow.
just not the interest.
Yeah, land use I think is 10, if I recall, because every time you stood up, voted 10-0-0. That number sticks in my mind.
Right. Every committee should, except for the bylaw committee, should have all or a majority of town meeting members, and there should be one from each of the 7 precincts, just so we have a good representation across. And the land use committee, at one point we had, I think, 4 members who were from 1 precinct. So it's hard. If you call around, I remember Mr. Gallagher saying he just couldn't find someone. You can call and you can ask for volunteers, but if no one expresses an interest, then calling everyone who's on the list is not necessarily going to get you any additional people, because people are busy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, feel free to appoint John or Adam, and we'll support that.
I'll
And
reconsider.
We will.
I'll
We will
reconsider.
help support your appointments.
And I'll ask my friend over here what sort of time commitment, say, Ways and Means takes up, and I'll sort of pick his brain. And maybe you might be getting an email from me sooner rather than later.
Sally, do you get an attendance report? Is that required? I mean, we're required to sign, or I don't know, are we required, or, yeah, we're
Yes,
supposed
to make
Yes.
sure that we have a quorum.
sign in. Okay, well, yeah, I don't think,
I do not have the attendance list, but according to the bylaw, any member who is absent should be listed in the newspaper.
oh, really? Oh,
Wow.
wow.
Is that happening, do you know?
I don't think it's happened for several years.
Okay.
And it's like anything else. Once it doesn't happen, it becomes custom.
Yeah.
Or
That's
once it happens, it becomes custom.
I can't imagine that there would be people who would be appointed or agree to be appointed, and then Of course, things happen. I mean, personal issues, I'm sure, happen from time to time. But I can't imagine anyone being absent over, 2, 3, 4 times. I would think that well, I shouldn't speak because I took me
Just
a
look
while.
around. Town meeting from Monday to Wednesday. There's probably a good 20 people that were not there Wednesday that were there Monday.
And
Oh,
the later
really?
and the later at night it gets, the more I notice the crowd thins too.
Right, because people have to work, so they need to leave early.
Or the debate starts
or-
to get a little long in the tooth.
Right,
Which happens.
or the whatever hot button issue, whatever issue they want to be there for, is voted, and so they think they don't have to be there anymore. I think that happens a lot more in towns with open town meeting,
Oh, yeah.
where you have to get a lot of people from the town into the auditorium.
Well, actually, every resident can be part of it.
Right.
Actually, interestingly enough, Stoneham has that.
Bedford
Towns
has it
over.
also, I
Yeah.
believe.
That I was surprised by.
How are these, all of the people, the backup people for the different warrant articles, the DPW, whatever it happens to be, whatever the warrant happens to be, do they just take it upon themselves to make sure they're there? Do you notify them? Or is it something, I mean, if the police department, for example, if they know they have to, they definitely automatically show up, or do they have to be notified?
I think that is under the direction of their boss. So in that case, it would be the town administrator. I don't think I've ever attended a town meeting where a budget item coming forth from a certain department that the department manager was not there.
It was not there, yeah.
So for example, the Council on Aging budget, the director is always there.
Yeah, yeah. Then again, Mr. Petrin is, he sort of speaks for everyone at one time or another. He manages to get into everything.
I had one more question if I could ask.
Sure, go ahead.
I was wondering, Sal, if you had a vision for Burlington that you could share.
Good point.
Well, Larry, thank you for asking that. But when I ran for moderator, I ran as part of my platform, if you will, that I was running to moderate town meeting. That I don't have a vision for Burlington because I'm just the impartial moderator of town meeting. I like living here, but it's not for me, it's for the people to decide where the town is going. And as the moderator of town meeting, I'm just helping to facilitate the conversation.
But that's just
Well, let me
until
just-
you
let me-
get home. I'm sorry, go
follow
ahead.
up if I
Go
could.
ahead.
So what would your vision for town meeting be?
Well, I believe that town meeting should be a place where we come together and discuss the issues that are important to the town's future. Whether it's what kind of sidewalks we want, or how much we want to be spending on this or that, or what our priorities are. I think that as a local legislature, it's up to town meeting to have the discussions about where we want to go. And that has to do with everything on the budget. It has to do with what rules and regs, what kind of zoning do we want? And it really is up to town meeting. But it's a conversation that needs to be facilitated, not dictated, which is what my job is, to facilitate.
Facilitate. Do you feel it may have been dictated to some extent in the past?
Well,
Past several years, not pointing anyone out?
I think that people felt rushed, and people felt as if their opinions were not valued, and if they weren't on the right side of some story, then they were never going to be called on anyway. And I think that their participation was I'd like to encourage people to speak up because we're all elected.
The real problem was it became confrontational, which is not what town meeting needs to be, and that was unfortunate.
Right, town meeting needs, the moderator should just be facilitating
Right.
the conversation. And it all too often, I think that there were conflicts between people, town meeting members who were strong-willed and others who just didn't want to hear from them.
I think there's conflicts on this committee here like that, so. Not unusual, but some of that might be expected. and
Well,
Right,
Might even be
there's-
healthy.
and it's,
Might even be healthy.
there's a difference between conflict and disagreement, though, and you can always kind of work through the scenarios of a disagreement and come to, hopefully, a moderated solution to some degree. When it became, confrontational, that became uncomfortable, I think, for a lot of the meeting members, and I thought that was unfortunate. Not intentional, I don't think that was the case, but that just seemed to be how it was evolving, and that made it, unfortunately, the interaction started to suffer.
I have nothing to compare it against, but for my first town meeting, I thought you did a great job calling it like an umpire and moving the discussion. And there were some points that it got contentious, and there were disagreements that were worked through with different points of view. But the fact that we accomplished it in 3 nights, that's a feather in Sally's cap. I think another feather in Sally's cap was during the election, one of the themes was experience. And although that was Sally's first meeting as moderator, I think that we can confidently go to the next town meeting knowing that we have someone who's extremely competent at the position driving the conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And
You're
is,
welcome.
and is
Agreed.
interested in our opinions, too.
Yeah.
Yes.
I felt the same way the first time. I felt I felt slightly different moderator. I felt slightly not intimidated, but I didn't feel as though I actually had found a way to fit in. With yourself, I did. I could feel a definite change. I felt much more comfortable. And I didn't know you. It was just the way you went about things, I guess, and it worked. And I thank you.
Well, you're welcome. I will say that we had one town meeting member who, I think this was her 2nd or 3rd year, who spoke for the first time, and I was glad to see that. Some new town meeting members who spoke, and I was glad to see that, because the more people that we're a body of 126, and we don't all have the same opinions about everything, and so we can have a healthy discussion that brings us to a point that we're accomplishing what we're there to do, which is either to pass budgets, talk about the issues, and zoning or whatever else it is that comes before us.
Mm-hmm.
Could I mention one more thing?
Sure.
'Cause you brought up the term, you felt, sometimes it appears that town meeting was dictatorial. Well, I'm not sure what to do about it, but when you have the department heads spending 8 months preparing the budget, and then town meeting just in 2 weeks gets something this size, and with just a little blurb about what the whole budget, it's hard to have that discussion. If there'd be a way that, I like the idea of the town meeting member social, get to share some ideas and concepts and possible solutions. But it'd be good too if we could mix maybe some of the department heads in that type of social as well, if they'd be willing to come, if they'd be willing to show up. But that might be another interesting venue. Or
Okay, then we should invite them.
Sure, but
Or maybe to the second social.
Yeah,
let's make it the second.
to be
Well,
too
Sally,
defensive on the first one.
I'm sorry?
Oh, nope.
I want to thank you very, very much. I enjoyed being at the town meeting with you, and I'm sure that they enjoyed your presence here tonight. Keep up the good work. I'll be the one wearing the blue jersey when I'm in the audience, so you can look for look for all of us.
And one last question.
Yes.
When can we expect the appointments, decisions?
And,
To be made public.
Everything is in process, so they should be done. I believe I have until 30 days after town meeting.
Okay.
So do I need to send you an email saying, throw me on one?
Oh, that would be great.
All right.
Just appoint him.
Both of them.
All right, I will.
I take good use
Thank
of
you
my
for your
economics
All right.
background.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for
Thanks a
having
lot,
me.
Sally. Appreciate it.
Thank you for
Been a
coming.
pleasure.
So, well, I lost my.
Well, we were going to, move on a little bit to talk about a couple of one recent visit and one coming on some of the presidential candidates that have been in town, more on the Republican than the Democratic side, since that looks like a one-horse show right now. And Ted Cruz was in town, if I'm not mistaken, this past week, and gave a speech down on the Common and had an event. What town was he in? Peabody?
He was in
Was he
yeah,
in
Andover.
Peabody.
Or Andover, excuse me.
I'm sorry I missed that.
Yep.
Yeah.
One of our friends had gone up and actually listened to him talk, said it was quite impressive. And I guess Rand Paul is going to be coming into town as well. And to the best of my knowledge, this is the first time in a long time that Republican candidates have made a swing through Massachusetts due to the fact it was always a state where winner took all, and never felt that they had much of a chance here. But it looks like for the first time we might see some more candidates coming into the state, and hopefully generating a little more enthusiasm and a debate for both sides of the aisle. Any thoughts?
Appear to be no shortage of candidates this year. Actually, even the Democrat side is growing, but especially Republicans. I've never seen this many names in the ring so often, with more names of people who are thinking about it.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. There are 9 candidates right now?
Yes, 9.
What's interesting is I think on the Republican side, you've seen a lot more flexibility for governors to come in and leave their marks in states like Wisconsin, where Scott Walker is the governor, and John Kasich in Ohio. Whereas the star of the Democrat Party for the last few years, for the last 8 years, or for the last 7.5 at this point, we're getting there, has been Barack Obama, with Hillary Clinton sort of as the second, the one waiting in the wings. But I feel like a lot of their rising stars have kind of suffered from a lack of exposure due to the.
Who can you think of that really is a rising star in the Democratic Party that's come up recently?
Elizabeth Warren.
The recent Chicago, the gentleman who's the mayor
Bernie
of Chicago.
Sanders?
No, the mayor of Chicago.
Rahm Emanuel.
Oh, Rahm
I was trying to
Emanuel,
think
yeah.
of. I mean,
Yeah.
he sort of, but doesn't seem to gain a whole lot of interest, I think.
I mean, again, Elizabeth Warren would be a star for them, but Elizabeth Warren, if she's sitting out this presidential election, and she's probably.
Why do you think so? Do you think she just thinks Hillary's got it wrapped up and doesn't want to, spend the political capital, all the political, the
I don't
money
know why
associated
Elizabeth
with
Warren
it?
hasn't decided to get in. I
Because
think
she would be a real, favorite for the very, far left aspects of the Democratic wing of the
I would love
Democratic
for her
Party.
to be
Just
the
like
nominee on the.
just like Rand Paul, people view him as the,
Why would you love to have
favorite
her
on
as
the
a
far
nominee?
right.
Because I think she'd be easy to beat.
Should be easy to beat.
Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think
know,
outside of
yeah.
Massachusetts. I
Thing
don't
that
think
bothers me is
she has much of a following. She
is-
does have a
is both-
following, but I don't think she can get to a plurality.
Well, I never make bets on political environments this far in advance. You never know.
The thing that bothers me is the idea of the Clinton and Bush, both of them. It almost smacks of royalty when you have 2 Bushes in there and Clinton in there. I just want so much for them to get away from that, to appoint or to elect someone who is new. They bring the same platform, the same ideas into office, whether it's the Bush family or the I don't know, has George Bush supported Jeb Bush.
Yes.
Well,
Have you seen anything?
I'm sure he will. I'm not sure he's done anything.
Willingly? Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
You think so?
absolutely.
Yeah.
I think he's done fundraisers and stuff like that, but
For him?
yeah. Or,
I mean, just like Hillary's got, the hooks into the money people in the Democratic Party, a lot of people feel that Bush has his hooks into the money people in the Republican Party. And I agree with you. I'm not a supporter of either one of them.
Yeah.
I think that their time has come and gone, and it's time.
And they've made their money.
And it's time for the country to look in a new direction, look
Yeah.
at some new political thought processes. There are a lot of people that I think on the Republican side certainly that I think would bring a new enthusiasm to the whole debate that the country certainly is going to have about the debt, about our activities overseas. I mean, the country's got a lot of challenges in front of it. I hate to say this. I mean, I know that Barack came in during a depression or a severe recession when he came into office, but I personally think he's left the country worse off than better off in his 8
I
years
totally
here.
agree with you.
There's very few things I've seen him. Matter of fact, outside of Obamacare, what has he done? Well, what has passed through Congress in 8 years outside of that one piece of legislation?
Nothing that I know of. And Obamacare is still a mess. I heard a
quite true.
discussion today, as a matter of fact, about how they possibly are going to try. If they try to undo it, it's extremely difficult to undo, some of the parts of that law.
Well, that's because they've entwined so much of the government into the
Yeah.
taxes and
Convoluted.
structure and stuff. It'll be difficult to disassemble, and some of the benefits are out there. The parts that haven't really been visible are all the taxes that are supposed to support it. That's always been pushed aside for political expediency, but there's got to be some workarounds. There were so many better things that they could have done to really create a back-end support health program, and they just completely dropped the ball. I mean, it's just, they think they think we're Europe or not.
They didn't drop the ball. They ran with it, and everyone let them, or the Republicans.
Well,
let
they
them
wrote a
run.
2,000-page law that turned
Passed it in the dead of night.
that turned into 500,000 pages of rules and regulations,
Yeah.
and nobody knows what's in.
Yeah.
What's in them?
Yeah.
Well, John, just to correct one thing that you had said, that he hasn't passed much legislation, that's because he doesn't need Congress. He's been
No,
passing everything by
That's a good
executive
point.
order,
That's a good point.
including immigration. So
Yeah, he hasn't worked with anybody, but executive orders can be just as easily,
Scary thing is he has a
Deterred.
year to go.
the glass
Just
is
about
half empty, the glass
A
is
little bit
half
more.
full. He only has a year to go, but yeah.
But, with a Republican Congress, it's a lot more difficult, even with executive orders, to get a lot of things done because of, funding considerations. Not that he still can't pass them, but, they still control the purse strings.
Have they used it?
Not effectively.
That power?
Not
No, they
effectively.
haven't.
Well, they haven't
No.
really been in place all that
Yeah.
long. They just really came into office in January. We're only talking 4 months here. And whether you like it or not, I think, they did some interesting things with this latest, is it Freedom Act or
Yeah.
the next generation, the Patriot Act, that from my own point of view, I think needed to be done. I think that the government has become too intrusive, looking into everything that we're doing. And I was happy to see them, pull some of the reins back on some of that stuff.
All I gotta say though is after something a little bit closer to home. In the last day, I went on to the Herald Online today, the Boston Herald Online, and I see a kid from Stoughton was killed over in Iraq. Not one of our veterans. A kid from Stoughton was over there fighting for ISIS.
Oh.
This happened in the last 24 hours.
Oh.
There was someone who was under FBI surveillance who tried to attack some FBI and Boston police officers that were trailing him today and was shot killed. This is all right here in our backyards, that there are, terrorists and suspected terrorists, and, they've got to hurry up and do something because, terrorism is coming to our shores. And, a lot of people from the United States and Western Europe are now importing themselves into the Middle East to fight on behalf of ISIS and Al Qaeda.
I can't for the life of me imagine what would prompt a kid, I mean, unless they're really having a bad time, why would they want to get up and, you've heard about Midwest, there have been kids that have actually just taken off and try to make their way into, and some of them have succeeded. They've accused some of the hooded people who did either doing their programs or putting their messages on.
Jihadi Joe, the kid from
and they claim that they are American. I can't imagine. And then 2 or 3 girls who not too long ago from one of the Midwestern states tried to go there because they wanted to find husbands, and I don't know. It's just totally amazing. I can't understand it. I really can't. What they would. Maybe the government is not doing its job, telling people what.
Well,
what it's
the
like.
hard part is you don't know, what the ethnic profile is of these kids that are going over. How they grew up, and what kind of ties they might have into this whole jihadi scenario. And let's face it, every society has, a few of its unfortunate citizens that are a little bit off the beaten track, and they think, it's like, it's an adventure. Let's go over there and fight against whatever. And
I think
I'm not trying to say there's any rationalization of that, but it's part of the human nature, unfortunately.
it's the opposition, so that's why they're going there. And
and
it's nothing different than.
There are people that grew up in the U.S. that hate the U.S. I mean, that's
Not any different than people visiting Hanoi at the time of the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
And
We
movie
got a
stars
couple
at that
actors,
too.
a couple
Yep, exactly.
actresses that did that, and go back to communism during World War II, or right after World War II.
The stories I thought were funny were those that went to help the jihad, but had to return because their cell phone wouldn't work over there.
What a tragedy.
Right. It just couldn't give up the comfort of a cell phone. So it wasn't that big a strong commitment.
You would think that would catch a lot of them on the way over there, that once they got there and realized that they're living in abject poverty, that this is not how I grew up, I can't live like this, and we'll turn around and head back real quick. But again,
It's not only the poverty; it's having to live under those laws. I mean, they're extremely restrictive. Especially if you're a young lady, forget it. You're there, and you have no say in anything.
one always wonders how the message is portrayed. I mean, I'm not.
Oh yeah.
I'm not hearing what
Yeah.
Jihadi Joe
Yeah.
is saying.
Yeah.
It's not in my
I'm sure
purview,
that.
but
Yeah.
there's some way of fantasizing this to the point where certain individuals think that this is
Just ducky. Just wonderful.
whatever
What
it
an
is, I'm not quite
experience.
sure.
I don't know what all these
fun I'm
young
gonna have.
guys have going over there and fighting for ISIS or Al Qaeda, because I don't know. I like my women to show a little skin. I mean, something's wrong when they're trying to throw extra layers on her and getting angry for I don't know, just something's off.
You've heard the story about the gentleman who was trying to introduce members of his family, and they're all wearing burqas, and he's saying, "And that's my sister." No, wait a minute. No, that's my sister. I'm not sure. To the point that yes, I agree with you. At any rate, I don't know. There's a lot going on internationally, and there's a lot going on with regard to the presidential elections that are not too far away.
Well, with all that's going on internationally, how does that reflect on the odds-on favorite and former Secretary of State under the Obama administration, Hillary Clinton?
How does it reflect on her? I don't know. I don't know if you can actually blame her for a lot of things. She certainly. I mean, you know that she racked up more miles than any other Secretary of State. Did she do any good? I would imagine. Then again, if you have followed the news and you realize that the issue with her server and her personal emails, and the fact that, what's the name of that charity that they have?
The Clinton Global Initiative.
Yeah, that it has grown exponentially. You have to really wonder about the contacts that she made overseas, all the different countries, and those people, those countries mailing in monies to her charity. You know, there's a connection there. I'm sure there is. So will that come up? Will that be a big factor in her election? I hope so.
Has her term as Secretary of State, is that a resume enhancer for her, or is that a
It could
a
be
net
either.
detractor?
I think it could be either. Could be. It depends on who's looking at it. I suppose Democrats are pretty much in favor.
I mean, if you're looking at a resume, as a Secretary, that sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
But if you consider what the last, the rise of Putin in Russia, taking over the Ukraine, the Middle East is burning right now.
China.
The Arab Spring, which was something we were supposed to get excited about,
Yeah.
that's become a disaster.
Yeah.
So how much of that is on her watch, how much of that is on Kerry's watch, and how much of that will you be able to...
It was
Price
really like the
aside.
House of Cards came tumbling down the second Kerry got in there. But I'm not a Kerry fan. But
That's
I'm not
before he got on
blaming
his
Kerry.
bike, right?
You're right. It didn't
Gotta
all
keep them
happen
down.
the day that Kerry came into office.
Well, that's true, but she's got Benghazi. The hurricane thing certainly started while she was there.
We never should have destabilized Libya.
That was certainly a mistake. Look, going back, we probably shouldn't have destabilized Iraq.
Fair point.
Considering
Hillary
all the
voted
issues.
for that too, though.
Considering all the issues that are involved with that, but that I think that will, in the long run, harm her more than help her. I think the Clinton Foundation, I think Benghazi, I think there are some other skeletons in the closet there that certain people will dig into pretty heavily.
I don't think Bill Clinton can be trusted not to do or say something stupid long enough to. He seemed to hold it together long enough when he had something to gain from it. But now that it's his wife, it's in.
I'd like to
Hard
break
answer
in
that
here
one.
if I may, and we have very little time left, and I especially want to thank the folks out there for watching. We do have some terrific programs planned in the future. If you, I don't know if they put Facebook, our Facebook indicator on there. There it is. Yeah. If you go on to Facebook, you can find out some of the programs. One of the very interesting issues that has come to light that we will investigate to some extent is the fact that locally the schools, our school system here has lost accreditation, or has given up, I should say, not lost, excuse me. And it's a topic that we will be addressing in the future. In addition to that, we hope to be talking about a lot of the issues that town meeting is concerned with, along with state and federal. Did any of you want to comment on that? We've got a few seconds left. If not,
Larry, what do you got for the next 10 seconds?
Yeah, very few, like 5.
I think it's time to say goodbye.
Good night.
Good night.
thank
for
you all
watching.
very much. Sorry.